Good evening, everybody. We are so happy to be back again tonight. Today we have our guest Kindra Rival with us tonight. Uh, she's been uh, actively involved in advocating for children, for moms and dads. Basically, you know, almost every single person that comes on the show uh, is somehow involved in advocating for equal shared parenting because we believe that that's the right way to go and that's what's in the best interest of children. We also have with us tonight Bill again as well. Bill is always with me on the podcast, and so Bill, thanks for the time this evening. And Kendra, once again, thank you for taking the time to join us tonight.
Thank you
Um,
very much for having me. I appreciate it.
I know you've been quite involved uh, on the grounds advocating for children, uh, for moms, for dads, basically to have both parents actively involved in a child's life. Uh, I've been following some of your work, and I'm quite impressed with what you're doing. Um, Obviously, a lot of men um, are on the disadvantaged side, and to find people like you basically speaking for us, it's just honorable. Um, but you know, I just would want to understand from you um, the motivation behind your work because you're actively involved. You are actively, advocating for us. What is your story? What is behind it? What's the motivation behind your work?
Sure. Yeah. I can explain a little bit behind that. And again, thank you, Ben and Bill, for having me on. It's an honor. I think the big thing is educating everybody, and you guys are doing that. So kudos to you for doing that. I think talking, telling our stories is important because a lot of people didn't do that before. And or when they started talking, people thought we were crazy because there has to be something wrong with their story and something wrong on why their kids don't want to come around, right? And that's not true. So I just want to say kudos to you guys for reaching out and making this happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, I think so. My story started about 4 years ago when I separated from my ex. Not my choice, but I did I did do the filing. Um, so at that point, he was upset, became upset, and everything then from that point on was more doing things to hurt me.
Mm,
And so one of the things that we find out is the kids are used as pawns, right? They're used to play the game. And so I got caught in that. Didn't know exactly what was going on at the beginning, and then started to do a lot of reading, a lot of listening to podcasts, and learning that what he was doing was a psychological or mental change in the kids to almost make them afraid of me, make them not feel that they had fun with me, or if they did have fun, somehow turn that around, that it wasn't fun at my house. And eventually I got to the point where I'm not seeing the kids. They've blocked me. They're not hearing from me. We're not talking. And my kids are now 15 and 11. So I have two boys. And before this, I was PTO mom. I was involved in school. I also had a job. I ran Cub Scouts. I had them in horse camp. I had them in football, right? I mean, our typical stories are probably the same, right? We were a very involved parent. That's where I was. And when we separated, it then became, oh, she's the bad parent. And they have to almost choose one parent over the other, which is not true in a divorce. You don't have to choose. Nor did I know when I got divorced, I was choosing to divorce my kids because that's really what it feels like. And the pain, the agony, I mean, I've gone through um, just so much as far as trying to cope on not being with my kids and the struggles that I would see when I was with them for a little while and I would see them and then how they would act to me or how they would react, I guess, to things. And it just I had to do a lot of reading and understanding. So I understood better on how to act with them. However, right now, because they are with their father, um, they they're kind of stuck, and I have to understand that they have to survive in that environment, and that's where I'm letting them. I guess a lot of people don't see it this way. You guys probably understand when I say this, but I feel like I'm being a better parent by letting them just live in the environment they're in, because every time they came back to me and then would go back into that environment, it would hurt them more.
Mm.
So at this point, it's just better for me to stay involved in their life as little as possible, I think.
That's so sad to hear. I mean,
It
um,
is. It is systematic of how this process goes and develops.
Mhm.
It's it, that's how that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to remove a parent from a child's life,
Yep.
and that's more damaging than having you there.
Yes. Yes, but it hurt worse for me to see. I'll just use my youngest son as an example, because it hurt worse for me to see when he would come spend time with me, that then he would get in the car with me and cry and say, "Well, they're going to go do something really fun today while I'm with you. So, I don't know if I want to go with you, mom." I'm like, "That's okay." I mean, there was times he would come up to my car and say, "I don't want to go today." I said, "That's okay." I said, "But I'll be here next time. And if you want to go next time, that's okay." Um, there was times that they used uh, Christmas Christmas presents, withholding Christmas presents from him, because he chose not to call the other lady that entered in my ex's life mom. And so because he chose not to call her mom, they would hold Christmas presents over his head and say, "We're not going to give you Christmas." Um, there was times where, and I noticed it was a trend every time he had fun at my house. He
Hmm.
had a birthday party. We had friends over, swimming, animals there. We had a blast. He goes back to his dad's. I go to pick him up the next week when he's supposed to be with me, as we had a 50-50 agreement.
Mhm.
He comes out to the car and says, "I'm not coming." I said, "You're not coming? We're going on vacation to grandma and grandpa's house." And he said, "No, I can't come this time." And it's just because they go back to that house and they have to be drilled about, "What did you do? Was your mom hurting you? Was there anything, that she said to you that you didn't like? Are you sure you're okay? Do you feel that you're okay?" Well, all that is a mental struggle with the kids, and they start thinking, "Was I okay? Is mom okay? Maybe she was being mean," right? And it makes them question. And so they're not mad at you, they're not fearful of you, but because of the questions they're asked, they become that way. They think that is what happens then at the house, and they get confused, especially guys.
I call that the KGB interrogation, where they put the lights on them, sit them at the table, and they grill them
Mhm,
over everything that took place, and they're displeased about everything that they show that was good.
mhm,
So they condition them to make everything sound terrible, so
mhm.
that this interrogation ends, and then they get praised for being so good and reporting back to them.
yeah.
One of the things that I've had several attorneys actually do depositions with my children. And one of the things they said, they're like, "Well, do you have fun at mom's house?" "Well, yeah." "Well, then why don't you want to go there? Why do you stay with dad?" "Well, it's just easier." And it is. It's just easier for them. And when I heard them say that, I had to be okay with letting it be easier for them, because I don't want to put them in that struggle. I don't want to make them choose. They know I'll always be there. I mean, at one point, my youngest came to my house and said, um, "Dad's not taking care of himself. He passed out in a store. He's not taking care of himself. He's not eating because he's upset because of a girl. And so we're afraid to leave him." So now he puts this fear of he's the victim, right? And
Mhm.
so now they're afraid to leave him because of what is going to happen to dad. And I said, and I kind of joked and I said, "Well, aren't you afraid of what'll happen to me? Like, do you ever worry about me?" And he goes, "No, mom, you have friends. You work out. You have a good job. You have it, mom. Like, you're okay." And I'm like, "Okay." And one of the books I read was Amy Baker, and I think it was in that book.
Yeah.
And she mentions that they will align with the weaker parent, and they know the strong parent is okay and will always love them and know they can come back to them. And honestly, it's not just me. It's a family divided. I mean, we've divided grandparents. The grandparents on one side is part of the process and the problem. The other grandparents, my parents, are now not in their lives. They've been told they don't love them, they don't see them. They've blocked them as well from all social media, text, everything. Same with my sisters. So their aunts and uncles are out of their lives. So it's just a family divided completely, where we used to do birthday parties all together, all of us together. So it's very sad for the children. So, anyways, that is what started the movement. That's where I started reading and researching. And honestly, if I didn't start earlier, understanding what was happening to me, I would be in a whole different place. But that is why I saw the movement and the importance. And I know it's happened to men a lot more than it's happened to women. But once you start speaking out, I started having women reaching out to me and saying, I just feel ashamed. I can't talk about it. How do you explain that a mom, is just out of their lives and they've chosen to go live with dad, or you've lost custody or whatever, might happen, because the manipulation can go past, just the children. Manipulation can go to the therapist. They can manipulate the court system, right? You guys know this. So, um, it's happening more than what we know. And I think the problem is I've started down the path to help change the law here in Ohio, but I also think there's a psychological piece to this. And I don't think anybody's figured that out. I think there's, Craig Childress speaks to it. Amy Baker speaks to it. But if you don't have those professionals that you paid for in your court system, and you don't have the supporting judges that understand it, you're getting nowhere.
Yeah.
You're getting nowhere.
No.
You can prove physical abuse, you can't prove emotional abuse. And that's the problem right now. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping parents that aren't in their kids' lives. And I look at it differently, and I tell people, if if you look at somebody that's gotten a divorce, don't assume that they chose to step away from the kids, because you don't know what the story is. And I was one of those that was probably guilty, that probably assumed more than I should have on why people decided to step away from their kids. But in ultimate reality, I think it's because either they gave up because it's emotional, they don't know how to deal with it, and I get it, or financially. And it's hurtful and it's sad and it should not happen.
You know, around 2 o'clock this morning, I think I posted something. Bill, you might probably have seen it. Um, for uh, Kindra coming on the show, and right after I posted it, I started pondering over, the parents that have been erased in the lives of children, moms, dads, and grandparents. And I had something very long, very lengthy that I was going to post, but I had to hold back. But I was just thinking about more about the children, the emotional impact that this is having on them. You had mentioned that one of the things that cannot really be measured or determined is the emotional struggle that the children go through. But when they get to some age, an adult age, it begins to manifest. Like you begin to see through them, through their behaviors. I've come across kids that are so angry. There's so much anger built in them because they grew up being manipulated, right? They grew up being deceived, and now they've come to a point where they see the truth, and they are angry with themselves merely because they could not react at that point in time. And I think about my own kids as well. Like every now and then I think about their emotional stability, what they are going through. And sometimes they tell me, sometimes we just cry because we want to be with you, and we know we can't, and so they'll cry it out. Sometimes they'll call me hiding just to talk to me, which I think is very unfortunate. I don't think that any child need to go through this kind of abuse. It's very unhealthy for them. I guess, Bill, you probably have the data that explains why we've seen a lot of kids on the street just with guns and just taking lives for no reason, because there's an anger that is built in them, and they are just trying to find a way to release that anger, and by so doing they take it on innocent people, which we can't blame them. I mean, those that cause that problem are the source. Those that choose to alienate them from the other side of the family,
Mhm.
right? Which is very unfortunate. It's just very unfortunate for children, and our society is so damaged um, that I was reading. I posted something a couple of days ago about the Canadian Bar Association, um, where they think that shared parenting is just not important enough, and they actually looked at best interest of children, not connected to shared parenting at all, which was quite sad. And I look at what I read, I'm like, okay, these people are just looking at their pockets,
Mhm.
right? Um, if we have shared parenting, truly nobody will have to pay them to be
Yep.
in court, right? If it's a default, nobody will have to give them a dime. But
Yep.
they see a profit in it. I mean, for them, I think the family, those family lawyers are probably one of the richest lawyers in the system because they make money.
Yeah, I agree, Ben.
I'd like to step in here about now, Kindra. You said that the physical abuse can be recognized and the psychological emotional abuse can't be recognized, and that's true and it's not true. It's you're right. The courts right now, lawyers and people that currently uh, do assessments of the children to determine whether or not they're suffering abuse aren't qualified to make a medical diagnosis to determine whether or not they suffer from psychological or emotional abuse. But the tests do exist. You got Dr. Craig Childress, who has uh, got the V995.51 confirmed case of child psychological abuse with two trauma indicators and one indicator from the other section, the two trauma indicators being rejection of a parent, uh, the five traits or signs that they are being manipulated or coerced, the 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 re, the, the signs, the behaviors they present because they are learning these behaviors.
Yep.
So these are the fingerprints left on the child of a manipulator or someone who's being coercive and controlling. And then the third is the shared persecutory delusion, where the child suffers in the delusion that a parent is all bad for them or can hurt them.
Mhm.
Currently, there's the five-factor model. It was first recognized by Richard Gardner, parental alienation syndrome, who had 8 behaviors associated with parental alienation. It has since been refined to a five-factor model by Dr. Stephen Miller, and since then it's been refined again to a four-factor model, with Amy Baker participating in the four-factor model identification. And then there's 3 different levels of alienation: mild, moderate, severe.
Yep.
So there are ways to determine whether or not psychological or emotional abuse is happening. It's just the courts believe that they can have these therapists uh, or social workers come in and do these assessments. It's like having a brain aneurysm and going to your family doctor
Yep.
to see if you ruptured a blood vessel in your brain. They're not going to be able to help you because they're not qualified in that area.
Mhm.
That's why you have to be referred to a specialist. So if you rely on a fa- family physician's diagnosis for a specific disorder that only specialized people can give, you're never going to get that diagnosis unless you get that person who has the qualifications. And that's where we are currently with the system. The people that are performing these tests and making these diagnoses aren't qualified to recognize what they're dealing with, and they make false conclusions. And according to Dr. Stephen Miller, for the study he conducted for the state of Massachusetts, they make wrong decisions 95% of the time because of how the abused people present.
Yep.
When these abused people come to court, they don't present normal range behavior. They present and display traumatized behavior, which
Yep.
is consistent with a person who is being abused and suffering from trauma. But because of how they act and they are erratic and emotional, the judges look at this and counterintuitively believe that they are the cause of all the problems in the situation, and instead of recognizing that they are the victim of abuse.
Yep.
And instead of helping them, they usually further abuse these people 95% of the time, according to Dr. Stephen Miller.
Yeah.
So this is the real failure of the system. And it's an adversarial system. They're not looking to do things in the best interest of the child. They're looking to pick a side, stick with it no matter what, and maintain the status quo. And
Correct.
once that status quo is established, it's basically allowing one party to abuse the children for the rest of their life.
Correct. Yeah, I can speak to that directly because I've been in the court system for 4 years. I spent over almost $200,000
Yeah.
and had a reunification counselor, individual counselors for the kids, and a psychological evaluation, all of which was not able to be completed because the court case timed out with the Supreme Court. And because it timed out with the Supreme Court, we had to either come to an agreement or it has to be dismissed and the case reopened. So at that point, everything that had been done to date had to be released. So that was a waste of money.
Yeah, a
The
waste of money, waste of time, and again, does nothing to support anybody in this situation.
Correct.
It destroys everyone
Right.
involved.
Individual counselors were chosen by the parent who had custody, in my case, the ex, and that was ordered by the judge because they got to do that, right? And the guardian ad litem that was assigned to our case. So the individual counselors were chosen and manipulated. I was never called to, you know, talk to them about how the children are doing or my side of the story or what was going on. And the guardian ad litem stepped in at one point because I told him, I said, I think these counselors are doing more harm than good. He finally did recognize that, and he made my ex stop taking them to those counselors. However, then the court reassigned a reunification counselor for myself and them because it had been a couple months since we had talked. I think it was 8 months or so since we had met a couple times. So the reunification counselor was assigned because the custody evaluator was brought in. The custody evaluator could not assess me and the kids because we haven't been together. So he said, you need to reunify first under somebody else, work through some of the issues, and then come back. The reunification counselor said, well, it could take up to 2 years for me to reunite you with your kids. They all have to be they have to be ready for it. And I thought, 2 years? You've got to be kidding me. So we went back to the custody evaluator. He couldn't complete his assessment. The reunification counselor said it was going to take 2 years. And the court system said, well, it's timing out. So we either need to come to an agreement, and their proposal and my counsel that I had hired at the time that I spent $90,000 with, instead of getting me custody, their recommendation was dismiss the case so that it doesn't look bad to the judge and the local court system, dismiss the case, reopen it, and start fighting your case again, but take a year break. The guardian had said, oh, I think she needs a year break from the kids. And that was where we had left things. I did at that point let my attorney go, and I went pro se, which means I'm representing myself.
Yes.
However, once I did that, I only was able to file one motion before the court system had to dismiss the case.
So hold on, they kept your children away from you for a year.
That is what the guardian ad litem wanted to recommend. Yes.
Wow.
That there was no communication. I was allowed to go to their events, but I was not allowed to initiate communication. If they reached out to me, that was fine. The same with the grandparents and the rest of the extended family. They just needed a break. They needed to not have the drama, so they needed a break.
Like, Bill, I don't understand how parents will be asked to take a break from their own children.
Right.
Like, it makes no sense. It just, I mean, sometimes when they are drawing this conclusion, I've had to ask somebody, would you do that to your own child?
Right.
Or if you're asked to do that to your child, would you walk away from your child for that period of time?
I've got an answer for you, Ben.
Go ahead.
I've got an answer for you because I had the same problem.
It's crazy.
Anyone else who does not suffer from a personality disorder is not going to understand this. And it's difficult for them to recognize it's, what you're saying, that a parent is deliberately harming their child. And they don't understand it because they don't do it. And because they don't do it, they have no ability to relate to it. So if they can't relate to it, it doesn't seem real to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so hard for people to recognize these situations. Now, one of the examples I like to use is, have you seen the new, you must know the name Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yes.
Monster. They did a TV
Yes.
series about him where most people believe he was a psychopath. He wasn't. Do you know what his major diagnosis was? He suffered from borderline personality disorder.
Oh, yes.
So he wasn't a psychopath. He suffered from borderline personality disorder. Now, for cases of high conflict divorce, they're driven by two different personality disorders, either people with narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder. And just so people can get an understanding of what you're trying to deal with in these situations, I say you're sitting there in the court and the judge is telling you and Jeffrey Dahmer to come to a resolution to this problem. You guys sit down and have a cup of coffee and come to a resolution for this. The resolution is the problem that is here before the two of you that you guys cannot come to an agreement on is Jeffrey Dahmer wants to cut your ear off for a midnight snack in case he gets hungry. And you don't want to give it to him. So now you're there in front of the court to help them, decide, well, does he get to cut it off or do I get to keep my ear?
Mhm.
You guys go and work it out over some coffee. Now, if you've ever dealt with a person with a personality disorder like that, you know there is never going to be any compromise with them. They're never going to be satisfied until they get to cut your ear off for a midnight snack. Then once they got the first ear, well, it's no good without having the second, so they want that one too.
Yep.
And that's what the judges put in for orders and delay cases instead of making decisions on the evidence that is presented in front of them that they don't understand. They say, you guys go work it out. And if you guys can't come to a decision and work this out like two adults, then I'll make the decision for you. And they're very condescending because it's not the two of yous. Again, if you're sitting there with Jeffrey Dahmer, he suffers from a disorder and there's never going to be any compromise with him. Everything's going to have to be his way. And that's it.
Mhm.
And that's why you're there in front of the judge. You need help.
Mhm.
And
So it's
usually,
very interesting. I couldn't get in front of any of the judges. It was a lot of behind the scenes, we'll call it, phone calls between attorneys
yep,
and the judge and the guardian ad litem. And so they would come to an agreement. And my attorney would call me and I'd be like, that's not what I want. This is not going any. I want to go to court. I want to go to court. And at that point, they were recommending that I would lose because
yeah,
my ex had accused me of abusing the children.
yeah,
And so, and this is typical in these situations, right?
yeah.
Is what I've come to learn. So my heart goes out to anybody that's been accused of this, but I understand where the men are coming from because that's usually how it starts, right?
I
Is,
was
oh, they
accused of
abused
choking my son.
me. Yeah, they abused me or they abused our children. And so that's how it started. I actually spoke to a lawyer. He actually runs, I think that in 40 different states in the United States, they have attorneys and they speak for the rights of men. And he said protection orders are used as weapons.
Yes.
That is what happened to me. A protection order was filed. It drug on for 8 months in which I wasn't able to see the kids. It was drugged through the court system. Even though, children's services investigated, dismissed it. And then we get to court that day. And I said, I want to tell my story. I was not allowed because my ex decided to drop it. We're 8 months in. He decided to drop it. But at this point, I have no relationship with my kids. I haven't talked to them. They've
Yeah.
been told other stories that I don't love them. I didn't reach out to them. I didn't want to be a part of their lives. I just fell off. So they're being told something else.
Mhm.
I did see my children then, and my youngest just started crying and said, I pray for you every night, Mom. I look to the stars and I pray, and I don't understand why I can't see you. And it broke my heart. And then my oldest was mad. He had already gone into that anger. And so he was already mad. And he wanted me to apologize. And so there was a lot of things that we worked through at that point. The court system then assigned somebody for supervised visits to try to get me to realign with my kids. The supervisor was my ex-father-in-law. So that went well. I'm sure you guys can imagine that went super well. We go back to court. we worked through with my youngest. My oldest was the one who um, claimed that I had hurt him, but I really was taking away his phone as punishing him. So they talked to him in a deposition, and they were asking him, "Well, if Dad took away your phone, would you hit him or hurt him?" He goes, "Yeah, they shouldn't take away my phone unless I determine it's okay for them to take away my phone as a punishment." So he's very defiant as a child. And so fast forward a couple of years, um, now we're looking at a divorce. So we get the divorce. A month after the divorce, he brings up the charges again, this time criminal, and he wants to try to get me for criminal charges on abusing the kids. It took me a year to fight that. And I did, no problem. 1 week before trial, we had depositions with them, and the judge and the prosecutor threw it out after they heard their depositions because the stories did not match up. You could tell the kids were being coerced, coached on what to say. And then when they got to my ex, and what his story was completely different, made up of lies, did not have proof. Went from a few bruises to now she broke his arm, and they said, well, where's the proof in that? Where's the doctor? Where's the surgery? Right. So we went through all of that. He couldn't prove it. So the case was dismissed. But by that point, because the court systems think that I physically abused them, even though it was never proven, it is now hanging over my head. And even though it's harder to prove emotional abuse, the reunification counselor thought it would be best if my ex and I could show that we worked together in front of the kids. So that was what her hang up was in the reunification. And I said, you know what? I have been emotionally abused by him. And so I met with him once in the same room, but I did not like the demeanor I was. My arms were crossed. I was reserved. I went into a state of anxiety.
Yeah.
And I said, I will not do another session with him. I said, if you want to put us together, she wanted to do equine therapy. That's fine. Put us together on a horse with the kids, all of us together. I can fake it. I can get in the car and I can cry and have my breakdown afterwards. But do not put me in a room and expect me to work things out. To your point, Bill, with someone who has a borderline personality disorder and, has accused me of everything and taken me through everything. And I've proven, myself. But when you're dealing with somebody like that, the stress and anxiety they put you through is crazy. So for the reunification counselor to require that of me to get along with my ex before reunifying with the boys was absurd. So going back to your point, Ben, it's putting all they want is money in their pockets, right? I mean, attorneys, counselors want to drag it out 2 years. We paid the custody evaluator $3,600. Everybody just wants money in their pocket. And then when you dismiss the case and you reopen the case, you now have to repay the guardian ad litem to hire him back on the case. So now we got another $1,000 out of our pocket to do that. And then you would have to, reestablish everybody else, what more money they needed for another year or so to keep this going. And just to my point, one more point, Ben, is I have gotten involved in the legislative part of this. And so we've been trying to pass a law for shared parenting, because even though I might have reservations on my ex, it's not fair to my kids. They need both parents 50-50. And if we would have started off 50-50 versus giving one person custody and one person visitation time, which is absolutely absurd, because you were both parents together with the kids before you divorced. Nobody deserves just a visitation, right? I mean, you were both parents together. So 50-50, if it started off 50-50, we never would have been to this point, because he would have had to prove that the claims of allegations of abuse were true, and he couldn't, and it would have ended right there, and we would have stayed 50-50, no problem. That's why I'm a component of it, because in front of the law, we're taking it in front of the state house, and I spoke. The people that are against the bill being passed for 50-50 with no child support is the Bar Association.
Feminists also here in Canada, extreme feminists who are not looking for equality, but looking to maintain the like in Canada, if a child is in a single parent household, 86% of the time that single parent is the mother. 6% of the time it is the father.
Mhm.
So they're still trying to maintain that inequality of custody and access here in Canada by fighting against shared parenting
Mhm.
legislation.
Mhm.
But when you go down to these feminist groups, and you ask them this question whether they grew up with both of their parents in the house,
Mhm.
their answer will always be yes.
Yeah.
Somehow they find. I mean, they've taken this whole feminist movement to a different level where it's not about family anymore because Bill, um, growing up, you see, like, what I saw was more of the moms and the dads working together
Mhm.
in a home. I saw a family that was united, that was very, very solid. And now, there's this rise of this feminist movement that basically says, no, it's not about equality anymore. Equality in the workplace, I understand that. I know there's a gap there that needs to be filled. But when it comes to family, I think it should be a no-go zone
Mhm.
for them, right? It should be a no-go because you are literally destroying a family. You are destroying children. You are destroying both of the parents. I mean, I'm listening to what Kendra had to go through, and it's. I mean, for a lot of the guys that are watching us, it's not just men that go through this. There are women also that are going through the same thing. It's just very unfair, and like you and Bill, I've also been accused. Like, I've been accused of waving a gun and threatening to hurt my children in my house. And
Yep.
I've had the tactical team raid my house, break everything down, searching for a gun, and they found nothing. Eventually, when they looked at her story, they looked at everything that she said, plus what she filed in court. It was completely two different stories. And I had the right to charge her,
Mhm.
but I had to think twice. She's the mother of my children,
Mhm.
and I cannot explain to my children that I have put their mother behind bars. And so I had to pull back and think twice. But I mean, people can be so wicked,
Mhm.
right? You
Mhm.
live in the same household, everything was fine. You decide to move out, and then that person is now a demon. Like, it's
Yep.
just, if it's not a mental health issue, Bill, I don't know what else it is.
Yeah.
Well, it really is. Jordan Peterson, he says it's okay for parents to fight, and it's okay for children to witness parents fight. What's really important is they see how the parents resolve these conflicts and these fights so that they can learn to do that in their lives. And as you see with society today, that the divorce rates are so high, parents will fight, children see their parents fight, and instead of resolving the conflict, they walk away. They
Mhm.
dissolve the marriage, they fight, and
Mhm.
this is becoming the pattern, which is what is leading to a decrease in the number of marriages and an increase in the number of divorces. Um, and also, the courts are being overwhelmed because the people growing up in this dysfunction and unable to resolve conflict
Mhm.
are the ones going to court and continuing this because
Mhm.
they grew up and that's what they saw,
Mhm.
and they believe that's how
Mhm.
families interact now, and that's how you resolve these issues is you go to courts. You throw all your money at it and you waste all your resources, and it destroys everybody,
Yep.
destroys everyone involved.
I mean,
It
it's very
does.
costly. It's so costly. I spent, Bill knows much of my story, but 7+ years in the courts.
Wow.
And imagine being in the court for 7 years, how much money you spend. That money can literally go into the children's education fund,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But it's going into somebody's pocket just because they are just having fun to see both parents just going at each other, and
Yep.
then see the children just grow up, hurting that
Mhm.
they can't have both of their parents
Mhm.
agreeing, you know, on what is best for them.
Mhm.
And it's very sad. It's just very, very unfortunate. Very
It
unfortunate.
is. It is. And, you know, I think some people might look and say, why would you spend all that money in court? What, why don't you just walk away? And it's hard to make that
It's hard
decision.
experience, yeah.
It is hard to say, okay, look, I'm going to fight a different way now. So it's not that you're giving up or you're not fighting. You're just going to fight a different way. You're going to approach it a little differently. So, but it's hard to walk away from that because you keep having hope that the next lawyer, the next thing, the next court date will get you right, that what you need. And I hate to say it, but it's lost hope. And all that time that you're hoping for that, you're only being pulled further away from your kids because you're not
Mm.
seeing them during that time. And that's just so hard. And, what breaks my heart is I will help some people or mentor them on what to do, and they will make it further in their court system and their county than I make it because their judge sees it. Their judge supports it. The
Mm.
judge stops it, immediately threatens the person that's doing the alienation and says, the next time that you don't make it to bring the kids to the visitation or whatever it might be, or you don't allow them to call or you block them, you're going to jail. And they will follow through on it. And in my case, the judge, as soon as I tell the attorneys what county I'm in, they're like, "Oh, they don't do anything. You're not going to get anywhere." But it's
Wow.
that hope we hang on to, and that's so sad. But as parents, we hope the next thing. We hope the next $1,000. We hope the next lawyer, and it's just very sad. But that's what we have. That's what we have.
Well, we just want to protect our children. We want to
Yeah.
keep our children in our lives, and that's what we're fighting for. And we do anything for that, and they prey on that,
Yep.
and it's disgusting. And like you said, um, recognition of this process is paramount, because once you get into the false allegations and paperwork gets put on one side, again, this will influence the family courts, even though civil family courts are civil matters and criminal
Yep.
courts are where they deal with criminal matters such as peace bonds and recognizances. They're supposed to be dealt with in criminal court, not influence family court, because that's nothing to do with family matter.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with whether or not you're a capable parent or you're a good parent. These are allegations of criminal offenses that require criteria to be satisfied for you to be found guilty.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, they are being used as a tool to influence the courts. Now, like you said, you've counseled some people and helped them. I received a phone call from a friend of mine that lives on the other side of Canada, and he said his nephew got himself in trouble. He had kept his child away from the mother, and he was arrested. The RCMP issued him a summons under Section 282 of the Criminal Code to be charged for keeping a child in contravention of a court order. Now, while the RCMP issued him the summons, they weren't capable of doing so because the only person in the province that can allow someone to be charged under Section 282 in Canada is the Attorney General of that province. So the police issued this, and I told him what to do, how to get the records from the police to represent himself, because they showed up, said, "You're keeping the child from the mother. If you do it again, we'll come back tomorrow and arrest you." So they tried to scare him and threaten him,
Sure.
gave him a piece of paper and drove away. But because they gave him that piece of paper, he had evidence to show they didn't do their job, they didn't handle the situation properly, and he got a lot of documents uh, because he had made the same reports to the RCMP that his child was being kept from him repeatedly, and they did nothing about it. So
Mm-hmm.
the one time he keeps the child from the mother, they show up and threaten to arrest him and issue him a summons for a criminal charge with 10 years. Minimum 10 years under Section 282. So this is a serious criminal offense that has no statute of limitations.
But I think the police can be very biased, Bill.
They
Yes.
are.
Very, very
They
biased.
they don't know how to deal with these situations, and they come in and make things worse. And I helped him nullify the fact that the RCMP had taken sides in this matter against him because they failed to take any police reports. And he had it all documented, all the calls he made, all the reports he made, and all the times his child was kept from them, and they did nothing. And the one time he did the exact same thing, that they showed up at his home and issued him a summons to appear in court. So he had evidence to show they were discriminatory and at, in enforcing their policies in the Criminal Code of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, they provided him with a lot of information, started taking reports of everything that had happened, and were very diligent in documenting his complaints after that. So that when he did finally get to court a few months later, instead of facing 10 years in jail for keeping his child and possibly never losing custody of his child, the judge awarded him joint shared custody with final say because of all the documented evidence he had of the process
Mhm.
that his ex had put him through, and it was
Mhm.
malicious.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. And I had the same experience, during the COVID, where one of my kids had the virus, and the mom also had the virus. Um, for many times she will withhold the children from coming, right?
Yep.
You go to the police station, lawyer tells you, okay, anytime this happens, you need to go file a report, so you have something on record.
Yep.
So I just followed that instruction, and then they come to me sick, and they are carrying the virus. I cannot, send them back with the same virus because I'm basically putting everybody else around them in harm's way. So I decided to keep the kids, and then she goes to the police station that I'm withholding the kids against the court order. So I basically told the police, okay, this is the situation. You want them to cross the border to the other side of town? I have no problem. But if anything happens, it's going to be on you. The police officer called me and said, no, you keep the children until they're healthy, right? So there are some of them that
Yep.
are very human, right? And there are some that just, they just hear one side of the story and then they come after you really hard, which is very unfair. I mean, it's unfair for everybody when the story is just one sided and then they go after the other person.
Mhm.
Because what happens is that the children, the sad thing about this is the children are watching,
Yep.
right? Uh, in that case, for example, they couldn't reach my phone, so they called my daughter on her phone, and I was very upset with the police officer. I'm like, why would you
Right.
call a 9 year old
Right.
Yes,
for
that's
me to love the
completely
guy,
inappropriate. That's
Yeah.
completely inappropriate.
Yep.
right? I was very upset with the officer. I said, you can't do this. Like, you
Yep.
just can't. It's just not acceptable, right? A police officer calling to talk to her dad. Like, what are you trying to create in her mind,
Yeah.
right?
The
Go
police
ahead, Joe.
show up. The police show up and deal with these situations like everyone's a criminal, instead of recognizing these are civil matters and
Mhm.
they need to deal with them as such. You're dealing with people that are traumatized, and instead of being aware of that fact and trying to be understanding and reasonable with them, you go in there and bark orders at them and threaten to shoot them or arrest them if they don't comply with what they're saying.
Yep.
And that's how they treat you. And
Yeah.
you're already traumatized and been traumatized, and your child is being kept from you, and you're desperate to see your child, and you're calling them for help, and they're further abusing you.
Yeah,
Yep.
It's disgusting.
yeah.
It's it's systematic, and not only that, I had the opportunity to interview Dr. Donald Dutton, who recognized this back in the 70s. He's a Canadian doctor, and he 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 recognized that the police were having difficulties. One of the consistently year after year, the biggest problem they had was dealing with domestic situations. So they developed a program, and he was going around training police officers how to deal with domestic situations. Um, that program has since gone away, and I got to interview him just last year, and it's like I said, he's been doing this since the 70s, recognized this
Mhm.
problem and tried to help and create uh, programs to train people and police on how to better handle these situations and deal with them better. And right now, no one's doing it anymore, and he's quite frustrated. And one of the people that was taking part in the interview asked specifically, what can be done to help this? And no one spoke up. No one had an answer for what can be done to make sure these situations of parental alienation, false reports, and police interaction are handled properly. And no one had a solution.
Yep.
So, Kindra, with your efforts to, introduce shared parenting in Ohio, like,
Mhm.
how far have you come? What's the progress? Are more, people getting involved, jumping on board to basically support your efforts there?
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah. You know, Kentucky and Arkansas have already passed laws
Yep.
that are equal shared parenting, they have all already seen a decrease in the false allegations abuse, or the false allegations, I guess I should say. They've seen a decrease in parents going to the court system to fight things out. And so we have almost copied that bill with some improvements to it and changes and suggestions from them. And so we ran it through committee last year. However, we had an election this year. So new people have come in just in January. So we are now getting the bill reintroduced. It has to have a new number to go through legislation. So it has to have a new number, and then we will start talking again to all of the newly elected plus the past committee chairs, and start taking it to them and explaining where we're coming from. But we unfortunately have to kind of start all over just because of the election year, and so it didn't get passed through. So that's why. The big hangup was the bar association stood in and they said, we don't want children that are, really abused by parents to, be affected by this. No kidding. We don't either, right? If kids are getting abused by parents before the divorce, that's a completely different story than if they get divorced and then now all of a sudden the parents are abusive, but they got along before and they were a fine parent. That's a completely different story. So we have it built into the law, the way that we're writing it, is you have to have clear and concise evidence of abuse. You cannot go on presumptions. So that is one thing that we are changing in the bill. And there's a few other small things, but that is the big thing. So, but it's very interesting. It'll be very interesting because we know we're going to have to fight the bar association again. And that's going to be our big pushback.
So statewide, is it like in terms of uh, the popularity of the bill? You guys did it the first time. Is it something that it's been accepted across the board? Uh,
So it has been accepted. When we started this process last time, I think I forget how many different counties that we have, but we had over 60 or 70% of the chairs from each of the counties, of the legislative representatives, that supported the bill. So the big thing was trying to get the last few that supported it across the board to get it to the Senate to approve it in Ohio. So first we had to get the House of Representatives, then it goes to the Senate. So we had 50+% participation and support from our legislators. So unfortunately, you have to be able to take it to them and present, and they have to allow everybody to speak their mind on the case. When I went to the House, our state House, to speak, I think we were slotted to go in at 2 in the afternoon, I think. We did not leave until 9 o'clock at night because there were so many different people speaking, telling their stories, why they supported the bill. Then they had to allow people to come in and talk about why they opposed the bill. And so that was another several hours in another meeting. So it's nothing that's going to get done fast. And I know that it's not a short term fix, it's a long term goal for all of these other families that we're trying to help in the future prevent this from happening.
Bill, you were gonna add something, and I think I jumped in.
Well, yeah, I was aware Kentucky had adopted the 50-50 shared parenting legislation. I wasn't aware that Arkansas had. I knew 18 other states were looking at adopting the shared parenting legislation because it was so successful in Kentucky. And I do hope you are successful in getting the shared parenting legislation there in Ohio. So good luck to you on that.
Thank you. Yes, I think that'll make a big difference. You know what? It's not going to be perfect. I get lots of emails and messages from people saying, we need to change this part on the bill and this part on the bill. You have to start somewhere. Simon Sinek wrote a book. Start somewhere, right? Start with something, and then we can always improve it, right? We can always go back and make provisions to the bill, but we've got to get most of it changed right now because it's just old and it's old fashioned and it's written in favor of the mom getting custody, where they typically stayed at home a lot of the time and the men went to work. Well, that has changed over the past 20, 30 years, where a lot of the women are working now. So
Yeah.
if you have equal partnership in the marriage, and then after divorce and they each have a job, then there's no reason that one person should get custody over another. And that's really what we're enforcing.
I think
And
from
to
what
your
I've been
point
reading so far, I
then
think go
too,
ahead.
sorry, to your point too, it's a family decision. It should be the family deciding what it looks like on the shared parenting, right? I might hate my ex, but there's no reason that we can't figure out a calendar that works well for us and that works well for our kids on what time they see me and what time they see him and who they spend at, what house or whatever, but it should not be decided by a court. And
Two
that's what
reasonable,
we're trying to
yeah, two reasonable people can come to uh, compromises on these matters, and that's the whole point, and that's why people are there in front of the courts, and then the courts, instead of recognizing the fact that one of these parties is not willing to negotiate and they're probably have some mental health issues, instead of recognizing that fact and taking a stand on the evidence and trying to make a decision, that they try to force you back to go and try to go sit and have a coffee and try to
Yeah.
compromise with these matters. It's
Yes.
that process has already failed, and that's why you're there in the court. So
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. But just going back to the Arkansas uh, bill on shared parenting. I mean,
mhm.
I've been researching a lot into the Arkansas bill, and I mean, from what I've been reading so far, they seem to have the best model
Really, that's good.
so far, and they actually make it more difficult. They've actually taken some privileges away from the judges in making some decisions that are not in the interest of the child. But they also make it more difficult for for a lot of these cases to make it up to the court, uh,
Yes.
which should be what every every court should be doing, because everybody gets up. I mean, somebody can just. I always say this, that it's only in the family court that somebody can lie so much and get away with it, and they're supposed to be a place of justice,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Somebody can go and lie. I mean, their whole appearance there is just going to be full of lies, but they get away with it because they know that nothing can be done to them. So it becomes a norm. Everybody goes to court. Those that want to play the system, they'll just lie, and most people just lie to get away,
Mhm.
right? And I'm sure, like you say, you've already experienced that where you just have to defend yourself in the lines, and
Mhm.
the judges don't do anything about it. They
Mhm.
don't hold people accountable.
Well, now false allegations will be a punishable crime, is how we're writing it into the law. So, and to your point, Bill, there has to be two reasonable people to figure out a solution, right? For that's
Yeah,
best for the kids. But I think right now the court system supports one person to not be reasonable and is supporting more of their mental health issues and separating because they're driving somebody to have custody. They're driving for this child support to be paid by somebody, right? They're because that's how they make money. That's how the attorneys make money. That's how the court makes money. That's how they stay in business, is to keep having this conflict rather than just having it from the very beginning. Sweden actually has a 50-50.
Yes,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, and it
shared
works, right?
legislated shared
Yeah,
parenting. Yeah,
they don't have any problems
yeah,
because they know if they get divorced, that's just part of it. They have to figure out how to make it work. There, and I think that's the way we need to be. We need to look at them as a model.
yeah, yeah. But I think a lot of countries are jumping. I think the Netherlands are also trying to do the same thing now.
Yeah,
They've been, it's on the table right now that they're discussing. So I think a lot of countries are beginning to acknowledge that shared parenting is what's in the best interest of children. It's just,
it's
tell the truth, it's just common sense. Right?
yep,
It's
yep,
it's common sense, but common sense doesn't always prevail, right? Unfortunately,
right.
but I mean, you can't tell a child that they can't see their mother or they can't see their their dad. It's just wrong. It's morally wrong.
Yes, children should not have to be forced to choose.
Hmm.
It's sad. They're 50-50. DNA is made up of half of each of the parents, right? So there's no reason they need to choose. They love both of them.
Yeah.
And I guess that goes to my point of where I'm struggling right now on contacting them or not. So I send them cards, I send them mementos, I send them pictures, I send them different things, I send them stuffed animals. I don't know if they're getting them or not. If they are getting them, is it making them feel guilty? Because I've heard both sides. So I'm struggling with the psychological part of it. Is it making them feel guilty because they can't go see that family and they know that family loves them, right? And they can't get out of it. So is it hurting them more Is it if I send those, is it bringing it up with the parent where they're saying, well, they're trying to reach out to you, they're trying to win your love back, where if I just not contact them for a little while, go to their large events, but maybe not contact them. I tried going to a football game and I stood off to the very side, right? My youngest son saw me, and my older son was playing, and I went to watch, and he saw me and he messaged me. He was sitting in between his father and the grandparents. And his message to me was, Mom, no, he didn't even say mom. He said, you don't need to be here. We have a new mom. You need to leave now. Fuck
What?
off.
I'm sorry. Now, Amy Baker and many other professionals refer to what you're doing, sending messages and little things like that, as trickle love.
Mm,
Um, you don't have any direct contact, but you're trying to let the children know that you're still thinking of them,
yes.
and that's called the trickle love method. And one of the things they say when you're in a position like that is you don't tell your children you love them whenever you see them, because that creates the anxiety for them that they feel they have to say it back, and they're already conditioned to not like you. All you can do is be supportive and be there for them, and let them know that, let them feel safe and secure, because like you said, if they know uh, love is unconditional from you, they're more likely to turn on you
Mm,
because they're not afraid of losing that love.
yes.
And that's part of why they turn on you, is because the other parent is using love, teaching them that it comes with conditions. So you have to do and say the right things, or I'm going to withhold affections from you, or you
Yes.
won't get to go to your sports, or you won't get to go to your friends, or you'll be grounded because you're not saying and doing the right things. And that's where the trickle love process, it's best to do something, because there was one girl who reunited with her parents, or whichever parent it was, after years. She had gone to university, and they just show up randomly and bring her groceries,
Mm,
because she was a single student, and she was going to school, and she used to, say horrible things to them. But when they did finally reconcile, they asked her, would you have rather us not brought you the groceries, or are you glad that we did? And she said, oh my God, yeah, I know. I was so happy that you did that. And so it's important to always let them know that that door is open,
yes.
because if you don't, they don't know the door is open, and they believe the lies they're being told.
Right. And that is very true. And one of the things I did was the reunification counselor, when I told her, I said, if your stipulation is I have to, fix things with my ex for sessions before I see my kids, I said, have another session with my kids by themselves. And I said, I'm going to write a letter. And she was very cordial. And she said, I will read it to them. I said, but if it's my last communication with them, I want you to tell them some things. So I wrote a letter. I explained to them I love them no matter what. The door is always open when they are ready to come home, or come back, or have a relationship with me. And I had her read it to them. And I wanted her to do it because it was third party. She would see emotions with them. They would know it was coming from me, but they wouldn't have the influence they felt that they had to react a certain way with their
Yeah.
father in the room. And so that was one of the things that I did. And I did send Christmas cards this year. I did not say I miss you, because I know that that doesn't go well, because they aren't really allowed to miss you back,
Yeah,
right?
it
You know that you miss
creates anxiety
somebody,
for them.
right?
Yeah.
Creates anxiety. But I do try to send some things, but I don't want to send too much. I don't want to, and again, I don't know what's getting there. So I thought the best opportunity for me was, if they're not going to hear from me for a long time, was going through the reunification counselor. And she did read the letter. She did confirm, that she talked to them about it and they understood. And um, yeah,
I'm really sorry for what you're going through, and it is a terrible process. And
it is.
thank you for coming on here and sharing your experiences here with us tonight. I really appreciate it.
No
Yeah.
problem. My heart goes out to every one of you, and for everybody else that's going through this, because it's tough. There are days I can't pick myself off the floor. There are days that are depression, right? There's days that we wake up and I just have anxiety for no reason. There's nightmares I have about my kids because I have seen them in my dreams, and I wake up thinking, "Oh no, that was just a dream," right? It's not reality. It's tough, but I will tell people that you need to be happy. You need to show your kids that you are okay. They
Mhm.
will follow you. They will find you on social media through here. They will watch you. Let them know you're okay. You're moving on. You're okay. You're not moving on without them. You'll welcome them in their life in your life, no matter what, at what point. But you have to be okay, and you're allowed to be happy.
Mhm. No, I truly appreciate you and your time. Um, and I'm so sorry for all that you're going through. Many people will always think that men are the ones that goes through this crisis. But I mean, I would say that there are women also who go through the same thing. And is it right? No, it's absolutely not right. It's wrong for any parent to have to go through this emotional crisis just for the sake of being able to be there for their children.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, it is very unfair. I don't wish I don't wish this on my enemies.
Yeah, no,
It's the worst thing that you can ever put somebody through.
it
Um,
is.
I mean, you are literally, you know, um, looking at somebody in the face and killing them slowly,
Hmm.
and that is where a lot of this alienated parents do to, you know, due to children. It's not just children that are suffering, but the parents on the other side are also going through the same thing. It is painful, and sometimes uh, I talk to people and I just ask how we manage to push through this crisis. But sometimes you're just so weighed down to a point where you just don't want to talk to anybody. But
Hmm.
I mean, the talking what we are doing right now is also a form of therapy because you're just
Yes.
talking it out with people that are going through the same thing. I truly admire you and all your efforts to bring shared parents into Ohio. We are also doing the same thing here. I think we have a much stronger battle to fight here in Canada.
Yes.
In the US, I'm really happy with what I'm seeing there with different states just jumping on board.
Yep.
But you're doing a very good job. Thank you so much. Do you have any final words for our viewers tonight, Kendra?
Yeah, let yourself grieve. It's a grieving process. Let yourself grieve, go through it. Be, embrace the depression part of it and embrace the anger that you feel. Embrace those things. And then in the end, just accept it. Accept where you're at. It might not be where you want to be, but you don't know what's coming several years down the road. So accept where you're at, be happy where you're at, and know that you are always, no matter what, influencing your kids. So be proud of who you are. Get up every morning, make your bed, go to work, do the hard work, put it in, and be proud of yourself because your kids are going to be proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
Great message.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Yeah.
Bill, any final words?
No, that's great. Yeah, we all need to practice self-care. Like I said, the only way to recover from the trauma that we've all been through is to go through the emotions. And if you don't, they just become repressed emotions, which lead to more trauma. And that's the development of personality disorders. So we have to grieve. And that's part of the process of recovery. So thank you for highlighting that and pointing that out. It is very important to go through that process, and it's 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 so important for us to try and be healthy for our children so that they don't see us and how the damage has impacted us.
Yes.
But I think the process also, brings us to a better place.
Hmm.
I mean, look at the wonderful work you're doing, Kindra, in Ohio. If I mean, this had not come your way, you wouldn't be a voice to many people, and a lot of people will not be connecting to learn from you. Same to you, Bill. I know you are coaching a lot of people, self-representing, giving them tools, to be able to, to survive through the process. And we all gain a level of knowledge with what we've been through, and I
Hmm.
think by that we're able to help other people. Right, we're able to be a voice, and I'm just hopeful that you know what we are doing will bring about the kind of change that will benefit our children in the long run. It's all about the kids
It is.
and their future. If we don't stop this now, it will become a vicious cycle. They will grow up, they will marry, they will not see any value in marriage, they will not see any value in the institution of family. And so they'll go into marriages, and then after a year or two or 10 years, they'll walk away thinking that there's no value in marriage. And so they are watching. But if we can, you know, communicate to them that no, there's more to marriage, there's more to family than what you are saying now, I think it will go a long way to save future generations to know that.